The golden chandeliers of the Grandview Country Club cast their warm glow across the elegantly decorated ballroom as Madison's engagement party reached its peak. Crystal glasses clinked, designer heels clicked against marble floors, and the air buzzed with the kind of conversations that only happened when wealthy families gathered to celebrate their own. I stood quietly near the champagne fountain, watching my sister Madison hold court in the center of the room. She was radiant in her custom luxe couture gown, a stunning piece from our latest collection that retailed for $15,000. The emerald silk hugged her figure perfectly, and the hand-sewn crystals caught the light with every gesture she made. She had no idea that I had personally overseen its creation. "Isabella." Madison's voice cut through the ambient chatter as she spotted me across the room. "Come here, darling." I walked over with a genuine smile, genuinely happy for her engagement to David, despite everything. David seemed like a good man, successful in his own right as a corporate lawyer, kind to waitstaff and clearly devoted to my sister. "Everyone, this is my little sister Isabella," Madison announced to the circle of her friends and David's colleagues. She's still figuring things out." The phrase stung, but I maintained my composure. At 29 I was hardly figuring things out, but I had learned long ago that correcting Madison publicly only led to bigger scenes. "What a lovely dress, Isabella," commented Mrs. Whitmore, one of Mother's bridge partners. "Where did you find it?" Before I could answer, Madison let out a small laugh. "Oh, that's probably from one of those discount stores downtown." Isabella has always been practical with her shopping. The dress was actually a prototype from next season's collection. A $3,200 piece that wouldn't hit stores for another 6 months. But I simply smiled and said, "It works for me." "You know," Madison continued, warming to her favorite topic, "I keep telling Isabella she should invest in her appearance more. I mean, you can't afford designer clothes like mine on whatever it is you do for work, but there are nice options at reasonable prices." The circle of guests nodded politely, some looking embarrassed by Madison's comments. David shifted uncomfortably beside her. "Madison," he said gently, "maybe we should." No, it's fine," Madison waved him off. "Isabella knows I only want what's best for her. She just needs to be more ambitious, more focused on success." Mother appeared at my elbow, her Chanel perfume announcing her presence before her words did. "Madison dear, why don't you show everyone your ring again? It's absolutely stunning." As Madison launched into the story of David's proposal for the third time that evening, I excused myself and stepped out onto the terrace. The October air was crisp, and the city lights twinkled below like earthbound stars. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant, Sarah. "The Milan show was incredible. Orders are through the roof. Vogue wants to do a feature story. Congratulations, boss." I smiled and typed back, "Thank you. Handle the Vogue interview scheduling. I'll be back in the office Monday." "Isabella." David's voice came from behind me. "Mind if I join you?" "Of course not." I slipped my phone back into my purse. "Congratulations, by the way. Madison seems very happy." "Thank you." He leaned against the stone railing beside me. "Listen, I want to apologize for how she talks to you sometimes. She doesn't mean to be hurtful." I appreciated his kindness, but we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Madison has always been protective of her position in the family. "It's okay. Still, it's not right." David paused, studying my face in the moonlight. "Can I ask you something? What do you do for work?" Madison always changes the subject when I ask. The question hung in the air between us. For 3 years, I had maintained the fiction that I worked for a small consulting firm downtown. It was easier than explaining the truth, especially to a family that had written me off as the disappointing younger daughter who couldn't live up to Madison's achievements. "I work in fashion," I said simply. "Really? Madison never mentioned that. Are you a designer?" Before I could answer, Madison's laughter echoed from inside, followed by her voice carrying clearly through the open doors. "And poor Isabella still thinks she can make it in fashion. Can you imagine? As if the industry isn't competitive enough without people who don't understand luxury trying to break in." David's face flushed red. "Isabella, I'm so sorry." "It's fine," I said, though my heart was racing. "I should probably head home anyway. Early day tomorrow." But as I moved toward the door, Madison's voice rose again. "You know what the problem is? Isabella has no concept of what real quality looks like. She thinks fashion is about being creative and artistic, But it's really about understanding luxury, understanding what wealthy women want. You can't afford designer clothes like mine on whatever budget she has, so how could she possibly understand the market? The words hit like physical blows. I stopped walking and took a deep breath. Behind me, I could hear David saying something sharp to Madison, but her response was even worse. David, honey, I'm just being realistic. Someone needs to tell her the truth. She's 29 years old. It's time to give up these fantasy careers and get serious about life. That's when I reached for my phone. I scrolled to a number I hadn't called in months. Marcus Chin, head of security for all Luxe Couture locations worldwide. My finger hovered over the call button for just a moment. Once I made this call, there would be no going back. The carefully constructed wall between my professional and personal life would crumble. I pressed call. Marcus? It's Isabella Santos. Yes, I know it's Saturday evening. I need you to revoke someone's lifetime VIP status immediately. Madison Tours. Yes, all locations worldwide. Effective immediately. Thank you. I hung up and walked back inside, my heels clicking decisively on the marble floor. The party was still in full swing, but I could feel the energy shifting as I approached Madison's circle. There you are. Madison exclaimed. We were just talking about career paths. Mrs. Henderson was telling us about her daughter's promotion at the bank. Very impressive, very stable. That's wonderful, I said sincerely to Mrs. Henderson. Then I turned to Madison. Madison, can I talk to you for a moment? Of course. What's on your mind? I pulled out my phone again, this time opening the Luxe Couture app. I wanted to show you something. Madison leaned in curiously along with several of her friends. On my screen was the VIP member portal, our exclusive section of the app that only the most valued clients could access. Oh, how fun. Madison clapped her hands together. Are you showing me the Luxe Couture app? I have VIP access, you know. Let me show you. She pulled out her own phone and tried to log into her account. Her brow furrowed as she tried again. That's strange, she muttered. It's not working. Madison, I said gently, there's something I need to tell you. But she was still focused on her phone, growing more frustrated by the second. This is ridiculous. I spend over $200,000 a year with Luxe Couture. David, is your internet working? Madison, I said again, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet circle. You can't access your account because I just had it revoked. She looked up at me, confusion clear on her face. What do you mean? You can't just, how would you even? I took a breath and made the choice that would change everything. Because I own Luxe Couture. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. David's mouth fell open. Mrs. Whitmore's champagne glass paused halfway to her lips. That's not possible, Madison whispered. I opened a different app on my phone. The executive dashboard that showed real-time sales figures, inventory levels and store performance across all 127 Luxe Couture locations worldwide. The numbers were impressive. $2.3 billion in annual revenue, with a 23% increase over the previous year. Actually, it is possible, I said calmly. I founded Luxe Couture 6 years ago. We're now the fastest-growing luxury fashion house in North America. Madison stared at the screen, her face cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been recognition. But you work for a consulting firm. You told us. I told you I work in fashion. You chose to hear consulting firm because it fit the narrative you preferred. The circle of guests had grown larger now, drawn by the drama unfolding before them. I could see Mother pushing through the crowd, her face a mask of social anxiety at the scene being created at her elder daughter's engagement party. Isabella, Madison's voice was small now, uncertain. If this is true, if you really own, then why didn't you ever tell us? It was a fair question and it deserved an honest answer. Because every time I tried to share good news about my business, you found a way to diminish it. When I got my first major client, you said I was playing dress up. When I hired my first employees, you said I was living in a fantasy. When I opened my first boutique, you asked when I was going to get a real job. Madison's eyes filled with tears, but I continued. I had started this conversation and it needed to be finished. The dress you're wearing tonight? The one you used as an example of something I could never afford? I designed it. I oversaw every stitch, every crystal placement. It's from our exclusive collection and there are only 12 like it in the world. Madison looked down at her gown as if seeing it for the first time. You've designed this? I designed most of your wardrobe, Madison. For the past 3 years, I've been quietly ensuring that you had access to pieces before they hit the market. Your VIP status wasn't because you spend $200,000 a year. It was because you're my sister and I wanted you to feel special. The tears were flowing freely down Madison's face now, and I felt my own heart breaking despite everything. But why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Because I knew this would happen, I said softly. I knew that once you found out I was successful, more successful than you expected me to be, everything would change between us. And I wasn't ready for that. Mother finally reached us, her face pale with shock. Isabella, is this really true? I nodded. It's true, Mother. But the consulting firm. I never said I worked for a consulting firm. I said I worked in consulting. Luxury fashion consulting specifically. Which evolved into design, which evolved into my own company. David stepped forward, his lawyer's mind clearly processing the implications. When you say you own Luxe Couture, do you mean? I mean, I founded it, I built it, and I own 78% of the company. The other 22% is held by my design team and key investors. The number seemed to hit Madison like a physical blow. She sat down heavily in the nearest chair, her expensive gown pooling around her like spilled emeralds. 78%, she repeated numbly. Of Luxe Couture. Yes. The company that's in vogue every month. That dresses celebrities. That has boutiques in Paris and Milan and Tokyo. Yes. The company worth. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I decided to help her. $2.3 billion as of our last valuation. Though the investment banks think we could be worth twice that after our IPO next year. The words hung in the air like smoke from an expensive cigarette. Madison stared at me as if I had transformed into someone she had never seen before. Which, in a way, was exactly what had happened. You're a billionaire, David said quietly. It wasn't a question. On paper, yes. Though most of my wealth is tied up in the company. How much? Madison asked, her voice barely audible. Is most? I hesitated. This was the moment of no return. Once I said the number out loud, there would be no pretending anymore. No hiding behind modest clothes and understated accessories. About $1.8 billion. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of the party continuing in other parts of the club. In our little circle, time seemed to have stopped. Mrs. Whitmore was the first to speak. My goodness, Isabella. I had no idea. My daughter actually has several pieces from your spring collection. She absolutely loves them. The comment seemed to break the spell and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Mrs. Henderson was mentioning her connection to fashion magazines. David's colleagues were asking about investment opportunities. Even some of Madison's friends were crowding closer, their earlier dismissive attitudes replaced by obvious fascination. But Madison herself remained silent, staring at her hands folded in her lap. I knelt down beside her chair, putting my hand gently on her arm. Madison, are you okay? She looked up at me with eyes full of tears and something else. Something that looked like grief. I've been so horrible to you, she whispered. No, you haven't. Yes, I have. She gripped my hand tightly. All these years I've been treating you like you were failing at life. Like you needed my guidance and my protection and my pity. Madison. And the whole time you were building something incredible. Something bigger than anything I've ever accomplished. And instead of celebrating that, instead of being proud of you, I was... She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. We both knew what she had been doing. I was jealous, she finally said. I was jealous of your creativity, your independence, your willingness to take risks. So I convinced myself that you were the one who was lost, who needed help, who wasn't living up to her potential. The honesty in her voice caught me off guard. I had expected anger, denial, maybe even accusations that I had deliberately deceived her. I hadn't expected this raw vulnerability. Madison, you have so much to be proud of. You're a successful attorney, you're engaged to an amazing man, I'm a corporate lawyer who pushes papers around, she interrupted. You're changing the fashion industry. You're creating beauty and art and building an empire. And instead of being your biggest supporter, I've been your biggest critic. The party continued around us, but it felt like we were in our own bubble. David had quietly moved the crowd away, giving us space to talk. What happens now? Madison asked. It was a good question. What did happen now? How do you rebuild a relationship that has been built on fundamentally false premises? I don't know, I admitted. I've been dreading this conversation for years. Are you going to cut me off? Like you did with the VIP status. The vulnerability in her voice broke my heart. Madison, I revoked your VIP status to make a point, not to punish you permanently. You're my sister. I love you. Even after everything I've said, everything I've done. Especially after everything you've said and done. Because now we can finally be honest with each other. Madison wiped her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I don't even know how to start being honest. I've been lying to myself about so many things. Start small, I suggested. Tell me one true thing. She thought for a moment, then looked directly into my eyes. I'm proud of you. I'm terrified by how successful you are because it makes me question everything about my own life, but I'm proud of you. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Thank you, I said. That means everything to me. Can I ask you about the business? I mean, really ask, not just pretend to be interested while waiting to give you advice. I smiled. I would love that. We spent the next hour talking, really talking, for the first time in years. I told her about the late nights spent sketching designs, the challenge of finding manufacturers who could meet my quality standards, the thrill of seeing a celebrity wear one of my pieces on the red carpet. She told me about her own fears, her own insecurities, her own dreams that she had pushed aside in favor of safe, practical choices. As the party began to wind down, David approached us cautiously. I hate to interrupt, but the staff is starting to clean up. Madison stood and smoothed her gown. My gown. Isabella, would you have dinner with us next week? Just the three of us? I'd like to start over if that's possible. I'd like that very much. As we gathered our things and prepared to leave, Madison caught my arm. Isabella? The VIP status. Already reinstated, I said with a smile. I called Marcus back while you were talking to Mrs. Henderson. Marcus. Head of security. He's actually a really nice guy once you get past the intimidating exterior. Madison laughed. The first genuine laugh I had heard from her all evening. I can't believe I have to learn about my own sister from the head of security of a company she owns. Well, I said, linking my arm through hers as we walked toward the exit. We have a lot of catching up to do. As we stepped out into the cool October night, I realized that the thing I had been most afraid of, my family learning the truth about my success, had actually been the thing I needed most. The truth, as painful as it had been to reveal, had finally set us both free. The valley brought our cars around. Madison's was a sleek BMW, elegant and practical. Mine was a modest Honda Civic that I had bought 3 years ago and never bothered to replace. I saw Madison notice the discrepancy and start to say something, then stop herself. What is it? I asked. I was going to ask why you drive that car when you could afford anything. But then I realized, I don't actually know anything about what you like or want or value. I've just been assuming. I drive it because it's reliable and no one expects a billionaire to get out of a Honda Civic. It's excellent camouflage. Madison laughed again. You're going to have to teach me all your secrets. Only if you teach me some of yours. As we hugged goodbye, Madison whispered in my ear, "Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on us." I drove home through the quiet city streets, the weight of years of secrecy finally lifted from my shoulders. My phone buzzed with text messages, from David thanking me for my patience with Madison, from Mrs. Whitmore asking for my business card, from my assistant wondering why Luxe Couture's social media mentions had suddenly spiked. But the message that mattered most was from Madison, sent just as I pulled into my driveway. I love you, little sister. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. I sat in my car for a moment looking up at my house, a modest 2-story that I had chosen specifically because it didn't scream success. Tomorrow I would go back to my office, back to running a billion-dollar company, back to the life I had built in secret. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally be myself with the people who mattered most. The truth, as it turned out, was worth more than all the designer clothes in the world. 3 months later, Madison and I had lunch every Tuesday. She became one of Luxe Couture's most effective informal ambassadors, not because I asked her to, but because she genuinely loved the brand she now understood I had built. And sometimes when she introduced me to her friends, she would smile and say, "This is my little sister Isabella. She's the most successful person I know." It was the greatest compliment I had ever received.